Dr. Trice, there's been a lot of changes made in the dental school curriculum over the past 30 years. Can you enumerate about those?
Well, of course, when I went to dental school, the curriculum was very definitely what you'd classify as traditional. Uh, it was 2 years of basic sciences and preclinical sciences, and then essentially 2 years of clinical training. Of course, a lot of the changes related to the differences in physical arrangements. For instance, when we moved out here from the building down at Blodgett and Fanning, we moved from an open clinic concept to the individual cubicle concept, and also into the unit laboratories, in which you had 4 persons per lab, and essentially the faculty came to the students rather than the other way around. By the way, this concept originated with Dr. Fred Elliott, who was the dean when I was an undergraduate dental student. He was the dean until shortly into my senior year when Dr. Olson became dean. And also having a part in that was Dr. Chauncey Leake, who was a pharmacologist that used to be the dean at the University of Texas Medical School in Galveston. Well, the unit laboratory concept brought about a lot of changes, one of which was that since people were physically apart, we had to develop a tremendous amount of audio-visual materials and also printed materials. And some of the things that happened today, so far as curriculum are concerned, really originated when we moved in this building in 1956. We had a black and white TV system at that time, and don't have the advantage of what's happening here, in which this is being taped. Originally our programs were live, so that meant, say for instance, in endodontics, which was a sophomore course, once a week we usually would have a live TV demonstration. Finally we got into taping. The integrated curriculum actually was adopted in 1965. This process started long about 1958, in which we were concerned that there ought to be some better ways that we could do some things. At that time, when we started the integrated curriculum, we started it with the first-year class. Basically, our faculty performed beyond the call of duty because in doing this, they did not have downtime to do it. They did it while everything else was going on, and we had 2 curriculums going on at the same time. Now, a lot of people today don't really understand the reason for the integrated curriculum. Basically, when you say an integrated curriculum and teaching topics rather than traditional courses, basically what it's for, it's really just a rearrangement of scheduling to get some things closer to where you feel like they ought to be, with a very important feature of it is that patient contact in the first year as contrasted to that third year. In other words, it allows you to apply some of those things sooner than you would, say, in that traditional curriculum in which you don't have your patient contact at the third year. That's one aspect of it. Of course, the benefit out of that is 2 more years of being around the mouth and being that familiar with it. For the most part, people in my class, we could hardly put on a rubber dam until Christmas of the junior year. and we were real neophytes from a clinical standpoint. That 2 years of additional clinical training is just simply a real advantage. The self-directed part of it, is to allow for individual differences. You know, for any given task that you have to do, you know, this individual may do it at a satisfactory level of competence the first time they do it, while this individual has to repeat it 2 or 3 times. If they change task, well, that position might change. The individual had to do it 2 or 3 times, does it satisfactory the first time. That allows for that individual difference. When in a time-lock program, it just passes by the first time, and the emphasis is on the self-direction, not on self-pacing, although it does have those self-pacing features. You know, most people, when they get out of dental school, or at least in my day, they'd make a statement, I learned more the first year I was out of school than I learned the entire time that I was in school. Well, that's not completely true, because first of all they had the background but what they're really seeing in a situation like that is they're going through the best learning process of all. That's one in which they are participating in the decision making, and there's not a teacher there as a crutch or as a barrier. In some instances, a teacher can be either. And you know, what's really important, after all, in a program like this, and I say it's a program, it's almost unfortunate that dental school is named a dental school, because really what it is, it's a training program with academic features. Nobody here can teach anybody to be a dentist, and each individual has to take a great deal of individual responsibility. And as much as you can allow somebody to participate in the decision making, they need to participate in this decision making, because that's really what's critical in the first place. You see, we can go out on the street and get somebody and teach them to do an individual task, but the decision making about that task is what becomes important. You know, most students, or not most of them, some students' attitude about a program like this is, well, heck, nobody's telling me what to do, I better get busy. That's the exact decision that a student's got to make in a training program like this in the first place. Of course, today we have the more complex audio-visual equipment. Well, you know, it's not really all that different, basically, than my day. The instructional module, you know, you have the behavioral objectives. This is kind of like a couple of teachers that I had that I considered very good teachers that would tell you what your objectives were in the first place, and the form they'd tell you is that they'd give you maybe 300 test questions and tell you your final test is going to come out of those questions. One of our present members of the faculty, I recall, did that, Dr. Nolte. One who's very famous for it was Dr. Sumter Arnhem, who taught unit restorations and fixed multiple restorations to my class. And the difference is, the only difference is that basically with this particular system, an individual presents the material to themselves by that instructional module, by the written word, and by the audio-visual material that they review. And the teacher contact comes after that. In my day, of course, it was primarily through lecture, and the introduction of the material was through lecture. The teacher introduced it instead of the individual introducing it to themselves. Today, the equivalent would be if my teacher stood at the door and say, "Prove to me that you've read chapter 4 before you come in here." Now you see, when you do have your patient contact, and of course that's assuming that the things that are done that should have been done, you have a better basis for interacting than you do when it's a one-side interaction. Plus the fact that probably out of every 50 minutes of lecture, there's really about 15 to 20 minutes of pertinent material. We could talk about this a long time, but I assume that addresses the issue enough.
Well, I realize that we're one of the, I guess we were the first school in the United States to have a self-directed type program. Is that correct?
Well, there's many schools that had individual pieces of self-directed programs. We're the first school that the entire curriculum has been integrated and self-directed like this.
Would you?
Other school that's been involved in this, the University of Florida School of Dentistry. However, this was a new school, and they had 4 or 5 years of planning before they initiated the program, and it is a self-paced program in contrast to being a self-directed program, and there's quite a difference between the two. There's many schools though that have many phases of self-instruction. Actually, if you'll analyze your experiences here, probably only about 75% of your didactic program has been really self-directed in the first place, either because it didn't lend itself to self-direction, something like anatomy, which when you dissect a cadaver it disappears, or in some instances when our resources have not been adequate to present the material in a self-directed fashion. Primarily what I'm speaking about is a part-time teacher that has to come in on a time-lock basis and get out.
Do you feel that we've been successful in our objectives with the self-directed program?
I certainly do. And I know there's a lot of people that disagree with me about that. But I think for the most part, that the graduates out of the self-directed program are capable of functioning on their own at an earlier period of time than an individual out of a very traditional time-locked program. I think there is some aspects of developing that decision-making. You have no alternative. And I know a student may consider that bad, but that's exactly what has to happen. I think we've developed some more of independent thinkers. I think we've developed people that are better able to handle their own continuing education, and they're not quite as dependent as the practitioner that got out of school from my day. You know, I hear an awful lot from people that's older than I am and for my age about, well, they just don't teach them this, that, and the other in dental school anymore. I haven't seen this process for this long a period of time. I know what is required of the students today, and I'm excluding the scientific advances from that, but I know what is required from the students today. There is no comparison of the dental education today than it was in my day, and it's probably going to be true 5 years from now. You know, when people get out of a school like this, and they look back on their school experiences, they tend to think that school is, what happens there is just exactly what happened there the day that they were in school or when they graduated. I recently had one of our teachers come down and slap down on my desk a Technique 3-unit bridge. And I really had to wait a little while to find out why he had put it down there. Of course, that's not my expertise in the first place. I didn't really know where he was putting it down there to criticize this work or where he was going to praise that work. Well, it turned out that he put it there to be a little critical about the work. But I can assure you that it was probably better than a fourth to a half of my class could have done at the same stage of development in their training. Of course, my judgments about that are subjective. But you know, what this place is here for is for a student to be guided into being a decision maker. And I'll say it again, there's nobody here at this dental school or any dental school in the world that can teach anybody to be a dentist. And most people that are in a training program like this, they want every learning experience to be a positive learning experience. Well, that's just not the way it is. There's just as much to be gleaned out of a negative learning experience as there is a positive learning experience. And of course, at that stage of your development, you want that positive learning experience. But when you get down the road to peace and analysis and analyze it, you sometimes will realize that there is a significant amount that you learned out of negative learning experiences too. Now, and I'm certainly no advocate of negative learning experiences. Don't misunderstand.
Well, I feel like that we probably won't realize the benefits of this education until we've had a few years out in practice and we realize that what we've put into it so far is actually paying off.
Well, I think you'll realize it sooner than you may expect. I think you'll be independent a little bit earlier. Now, that doesn't mean that that an individual that got out of some other program is going to be at all at that disadvantage. You see, this, as you beginning to realize, I think, this is such an individual thing anyhow, and it really doesn't make any difference about the individual sitting next to you. What he's doing, what's important in this process is what you're doing. You know, this process requires an individual to demonstrate a satisfactory level of competence. And you know, that's never forgiven. It's sometimes postponed, but it's really never forgiven. And eventually, an individual has to cope with this. You're going to have to pass, an individual has to pass national boards, you're going to have to pass state boards. Nobody else can do that for them. And it just simply requires that you demonstrate a satisfactory level of competence. Now, I didn't say when I said that there weren't incompetents out there. There are. But for the most part, that incompetent is a result of attitude rather than the fact that an individual has not demonstrated at least the minimum level of competence. And it's true that someone can have an attitude problem long enough that it'll affect their skills. Of course, I'm not speaking of illness or something like that. But if you sort down through that, probably most of the people that are classified as incompetent in a profession, you're going to find out that basically a significant percentage of them are in this profession are going to be people that really don't like people or respect them in the first place, and that's very critical, very, very critical.
That's a shame too, because our profession is a people-oriented profession.
That's all we got to deal with, not a wall.
Do you see any other schools across the nation going toward this type of program, or are they holding back on it?
Well, there's been a wide application of it, piecemeal. I doubt that you'll see that wide of complete adoption of it when you're speaking of systems. No, there probably won't be. But you know, almost every dental school in the United States has a different organizational pattern. You know, we're very fortunate in that we have our own basic science faculty. If a school did not have a basic science faculty, say for instance if they were dependent for the medical school on their basic science faculty, well, the responsibilities that basic science faculty had at medical school, their contact in a dental school would have to be on a time-locked basis. They'd have to get in and get out because of the other responsibilities. That limits what you can do in something like a self-directed program. There's of course, there's a wide application of the principle, but very few schools would probably have the resources to do it, perhaps on the scale that we've done it. I'll put it this way, it's my considered opinion that this will make a valuable contribution in the field of dental education, whether it's adopted or not. And a lot of people have looked on this as being an experimental program. It is really not an experimental program, and never was. An experimental program, it's what you'd classify as a developmental program. That's the reason we just didn't overnight convert a curriculum to this. Matter of fact, the utilization of this present building with the unit laboratories was developed before this building was open. At the old school, there was a unit laboratory up there that 4 guys were fortunate enough to be housed in as compared to the rest of us slugs in the class. And that went on for 3 or 4 years before before this building was occupied to gain some experience in it. Well, that original group of 8, which were very carefully selected, to participate in this program, and the other students called them the Crazy 8. They were very carefully selected. Most of them had some teaching experience themselves, and the reason we carefully selected them was so that if we did have to take remedial action, we had individuals that were capable of it. There were a couple of people in that class with minimal experience, and it just so happens that the leader, I'm talking about the leader, both academically as I recall, and the one that really was the director of the entire rest of the group was the individual that had the minimal educational experience. He was an individual that was fortunate enough to get in school with 2 years of pre-dental. Now, when we picked, when we enlarged that class to 24 per class, they were not carefully selected. They were randomly selected from randomly selected from the applicants, and of course the only way you got to judge really an applicant is what's on paper.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, it is loaded a little bit to the lower side, because if it did not work with the low group, it's not going to work at all. I can see no difference. From that standpoint in the approach and in the problems that individuals had in school, from old traditional programs to these. We're here for the purposes of helping students. That's our reason for being, not for our convenience. I must admit that it is what you'd classify as a student's curriculum. Not arranged for the benefit of the faculty.
You spoke about resources earlier, and I don't think that most dental students really appreciate what the state of Texas has provided for us here. I know in my own experience in visiting other dental schools that our facilities are far above some of theirs, which have only been built within the past couple of years. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the facilities and how they have come about?
Well, of course, you'd have to classify this facility at the present time as an old facility, since it's been here since occupied since 1955. And at the time it was built, it was the outstanding physical plan in the world. There's, of course, a number of new ones today. But when I spoke in resources, I really didn't want talking just about the physical arrangements, because there are a number of schools today in which the physical arrangements are superior to this school. There's no doubt about it, a significant number of them. What I meant in the way of resources was the support that the public of Texas has provided for the education of dentists. It's reflected in the cost of tuition in this state, even though there's some thought now about some raises, as compared to what the tremendous costs are at a number of, or most of your other institutions. You have a number of institutions which the tuition itself is over $10,000 today. Dental education in general is in financial difficulty. But the core of support has been provided here by the people of the state of Texas, with the primary function of providing primary care practitioners to deliver health services to the public. It's the prime mission of this place, and that comes first. That core support has been very adequate in the past. With today's inflation, some of the frills are beginning to be missing, and I'm sure in the future more of the frills will be missing. But we still got it good as compared to a number of institutions in which their core support is not adequate, in which the individual has to bear a larger share of the cost. Now, again, the prime reason that this institution is here is for the benefit of the public, and the fact that you and I can have a career out of it is great. But that's still not the prime reason that it's here. It's for the benefit of the public.
What do you see as the future of dentistry?
Well, of course, it's undergoing a lot of changes. It's really hard to predict. Every profession is under, for the most part. There are a few exceptions, I suppose, of what you'd classify as a profession, but are undergoing somewhat of an attack. Part of it generated in this period of time, in this particular socio-economic, political period of time, related somewhat to the consumer movement, and it's going to bring about some changes. But in the core, in its essence, I don't see that many changes in opportunities. You see, that's going to depend on that individual. It's going to have to depend on that individual. It's an independent thinker. It's an individual that's willing to crank up their brain, turn that light on, and think, and engage that brain. You see, that individual is going to rise to the top in almost any system in the first place. Now, when I say the top, I'm not talking about just financial success. I'm talking about success as being an entire environment of someone's life and what pleasures they derive out of this. You see, there's going to be a place for that individual. As I said earlier, the individual that gets out of school today is going to have to work harder at being a success. And a little bit, there's going to be a survival of the fittest. The fittest being overall, I'm not talking about grade point averages or anything like that. I can't see what you'd classify any drastic changes in the opportunities in the first place. Anybody that was very introspective, and this was true in my day, I don't know practically anybody that's gotten rich out of dentistry. Internal revenue won't let you do that in the first place. I know a number of people that have taken the dollars that they've earned out of dentistry and invested them in other things. I don't think that's changed a great deal from my day. Of course, there is an alternate route. Marry somebody that's rich. That happens occasionally. But you see, anybody that makes the choice to go into a profession like this for dollars is making a mistake in the first place. It's got to be a broader decision than that. In the first place, the economic drought that you've just gone through, you could have gone into something else and utilized that time, and from a financial standpoint, been a lot better off. Mm-hmm. I don't misunderstand. When I say this, you deserve, and by your efforts will receive a good living. But if an individual today is in this business for financial reward, I'm afraid they're going to have to wait till heaven to get it, because that's all it is going to be. Is a good living, and so therefore that reward has to come from something else.
Well, I thank you. This has been a special presentation of DB Magazine, and I want to again thank you for appearing with us, and I really enjoyed visiting with you.
Thank you, Ed.